Hello, I'm Linda Ann Smith. Welcome to Studio ABC. I'm a video creator for Color Art at COLOURARTE.com, and today I'll be working with their Twinkling H2O's. I'll be using Snapdragon and Blue Bayou in the Twinkling H2O's, and I'll also add Lemon Drop, Olive Vine, which makes a wonderful foliage for just about any kind of flower, and Wild Vine, just for variety. Spritz these with some water before you begin painting. You'll need to do that about 5 to 10 minutes before you start painting. This activates them and wakes them up. This is 140-pound watercolor paper, and if you look very closely, I have sketched an iris on that watercolor paper. I sketched it with a colored pencil, the same color that I intend to use on the iris. That makes it easy to disguise, and I don't even have to erase the pencil lines that way. I'm taping it down to a board. This will keep the warpage to a minimum when the paper gets wet. This is just painter's tape that you get in any hardware store, but if you happen to have trouble with it tearing the paper whenever you try to take it off, then a good idea is to lay it up against your clothing first, sticky side down, and that'll take enough of the sticky off of it. That'll not take enough of the adhesive off of it so that when you put it on your watercolor paper, it tends to tear it less. I have had, even though this is quick release, good tape, painter's tape, I have had it tear the watercolor paper, and you have to be careful in the way that you take it off. Be sure to smooth out the tape so that no watercolor will run under it if I decide to watercolor the background. That way it will be very pristine around the edges, but I'll have a nice sharp line of watercolor. I have several palettes for watercolors, and my favorite one's actually a white porcelain plate. But for simple paintings like this that just use just a few colors and I don't do a whole lot of mixing, I just use the side of the board that it's a plastic coated type surface, like some people call it Formica, but it's actually called plastic laminate. And so I just mix my paints on the side where I also tape my paper. I also brought a styrofoam plate over in case I want some extra mixing area, and mixing on the side of the board, sometimes I get my arms into it, so I'll probably end up using the plate also. These are highly pigmented watercolors, and I want to be sure I have plenty of water in them before I start to paint in these little petals for the iris. A lot of people think that watercolor is hard, but if you'll think of it as colored water, that it's going to run where it wants to. It's going to do what it wants to. And if you'll let that happen, instead of trying to be really super controlling about it, then you'll be much more pleased with your results. I often like to do wet watercolor on wet paper. That's called wet into wet. But for this one, I want some nice crisp edges. I want it to have a crisp appearance. So I'm painting on dry paper today. Totally different method from what you normally see me do. If you watch closely, you may see that I tilt my paper just a little bit, and I'm doing what you call a bead wash. In other words, there'll be a bead of water, and I'm just pulling it down until it goes into the areas where I want it to be. And that's the way I first learned to do backgrounds. We would put a bead of watercolor all the way across the top of the page, and then just pull it down, sometimes reloading the brush. And if you wanted a gradation, you didn't reload the brush, you just added water to it and kept coming down. So that's a method that we'll explore a little at a different time. I always have a piece of watercolor paper beside me for a wipe-off page. My favorite thing is to get the wipe-off pages and try to make something out of them. I'm deliberately leaving some white spaces between to give it like I said, a crisp look, a sparkly look. One of the things that beginning watercolorists do, and I do quite often, is they'll try to paint in the whole page. Every little thing has to come together. And if you'll leave some of the white space showing, see how I went over that white space just now? It just, even though I filled it in with color, it leaves a little bit of a sparkle between the two colors. And you can go back and add some of the blue Bayou into the Snapdragon color and just let it flow the way it wants to flow. That is the secret of doing good watercolors. Let the colors flow together. With time and practice, you'll begin to learn where you want the hard edges and where you want the soft edges, and where you want paint just to flow together and mix and run. And so you'll have some control, but there'll be some wonderful surprises. Some irises have frilly edges and some have smooth edges, and I held my paintbrush in a slightly uncomfortable position to make sure that I got some jagged, frilly edges on this one. I'm coming in now for the stem with a little bit of wild vine. From your color theory, you probably remember that yellow and blue make green. And remember I activated some of that yellow lemon drop color. I can drop some of that right into some of the greens that I'm using, and that'll give me a variegated color. I can also add blue to these greens. I don't even have to use the greens at all. I can mix my own if I want to. But look at the character and dimension it gives when I just drop in a tiny bit of the blue Bayou along the stem. Now that I have the blossom painted and have started on the stem, I'm just going to relax in this painting and just kind of eyeball where I want other colors to blend in. I'll be dropping in some yellows and some more blues into these greens. I only drew one main leaf to go with the iris, but I think I'm going to add some more that kind of crisscross and make a nice pattern. One of the things that I'll be looking for is to make irregular shapes in the negative spaces. Right now I'm putting in the one that I already had drawn on the paper, but going back to that negative space idea, you don't want it to look like a checkerboard. You want to try to make natural looking things, which would be a little more random. So my goal here will be, wherever I cross leaves over each other and behind each other, is to make the negative shapes between it different sizes, different shapes, so that it gives more interest to your composition. Before I continue the painting process with just music, I'd like to remind you that once you open your Twinkling H2O's and you activate them with water, don't put the lids back on them until they are absolutely completely dry. I never put my lids back on. I just store them on little trays with the lids off after I once activate them. Two reasons for this. One is that you run the risk of getting mold if you tighten up a lid on top of a damp surface. Not always, but sometimes that will happen. And the second one is, if there's any paint that runs into the little crevices where you screw the lid on, it glues it pretty tight. Those are hard pan watercolors, and they turn hard. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Share it on your social media pages such as Facebook. Leave a comment. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and to ColorArte's channel. I'll list all of the links for both my personal links and ColorArte's links down in the description box below the video. Thank you so much for watching.